The day I walked into Chukanori's compound, he almost fell from his chair. The same man who once shouted at me like a dog now sat shaking like a leaf. His eyes were red like someone who had been crying for years. People said he had not slept for 2 years, but when I saw him that day, I believed it. His body looked tired, but his eyes were still wide open like a man afraid of darkness. He called my name like someone who just saw a ghost. I didn't answer. I only looked at him. Behind him, his wife Adaora came out from the kitchen, wiping her hands. She looked from me to her husband. I could tell she didn't know who I was. I smiled and said slowly, "You took something that was not yours." That was when the story started again in my heart, the one I thought I had buried. 15 years ago, I was just a poor girl from Nsukka, trying to feed my sick mother. When I got a job as a cleaner in Chuka's big house in Enugu, I thought God had answered my prayer. He was already a big man then, with cars and men working under him. Everybody called him Sir Chuka. He used to talk sweet, smile at everybody, and give small money during Christmas. People said he was kind. But I saw something different when I started working close to him. One day, I was cleaning his office, and I saw a brown envelope on the table. It was full of new 1,000 Naira notes. I didn't touch it, but I saw the name written on it, Community Development Fund. I didn't understand what that meant until I heard him on the phone saying the money would never reach the village. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking of how he was stealing from the same people that trusted him. The next morning, I went to him and told him I heard everything. I begged him to return the money. He laughed at me. He said, "Nena, poor people like you talk too much. You better mind your work if you want to keep it." I was angry. I told him if he didn't return the money, I would report him to his boss. That was the biggest mistake of my life. 2 days later, police came to my small room in the boys' quarters. They said I stole 100,000 from Chuka. I tried to explain, but they didn't listen. They took me away. He framed me. He even stood in court and said I was a thief. I cried until my body felt empty. They sentenced me to 3 years in prison. My mother died while I was inside. It was inside that prison that I met the old woman who changed everything. Her name was Mama Ngo. She was always quiet, always praying. One night, when I told her my story, she looked at me with her tired eyes and said, "The man who made you cry will not sleep until he feels your pain." I didn't take her serious. I didn't know she meant real sleep. When I came out, I had nothing. No family, no job, no home. I started selling groundnuts in the park. I heard that Chuka's company was growing, that he even built a big house in town. I didn't plan to go near him again. But 2 years ago, I started hearing strange stories, that Chuka had not slept for even one night, that doctors and pastors could not help him. That was when I knew Mama Ngo's words had found him. Now, standing in his compound that afternoon, I looked at the man who destroyed me. He was shaking like a child caught in the rain. He tried to smile, but his lips couldn't move well. I told him again, "You took something that was not yours." He looked at me with eyes that begged for mercy. But I had none to give. That was how everything started to turn. That afternoon after I left his compound, I couldn't rest. Old memories kept pressing on my chest. I kept seeing his face, pale and scared. The same man who once made me kneel in front of his visitors to beg for something I didn't do. But this time, he looked like the one begging. It was strange to see power turn into weakness like that. I sat by the road for a long time, watching people pass, wondering if God had finally balanced the matter between us. Later that evening, I heard his wife came to look for me. She found me at the small food canteen beside the junction. She looked worried and tired, like someone who had not been sleeping well either. She sat beside me and said her husband had not closed his eyes for 2 years. Not 1 minute. Not one nap. They had gone to hospitals, to prayer houses, to herbal men. Nothing worked. She said sometimes he screamed in the middle of the night, saying he saw faces of people crying inside his head. I listened quietly. She didn't know I was one of those faces. She begged me to come back with her. I followed. When we entered their compound again, the place felt heavy. The air was thick, like sadness was living there. Chuka was sitting outside, looking at the sky. His eyes were open wide, red and swollen. I greeted him, but he didn't answer. He just said I should sit. He told me he had tried everything. He had begged pastors. He had even slept inside a church for 1 month, but still didn't sleep. He said he was tired. He said he wanted peace. He said if I knew what he did wrong, I should forgive him. I looked at him and said, forgiveness was not in my hand. It was in the hand of the woman who spoke the words that followed him. He didn't understand. I told him about Mama Ngo, the old woman from the prison. He frowned like someone hearing a ghost story. Then I brought out the wristwatch. It was an old watch, the same one he wore the day police arrested me years ago. I kept it all this time. He stared at it like he had seen a snake. I told him to open the back of the watch. When he did, he found the small folded paper I had hidden there since the day Mama Ngo prayed over it. On it were the words she said that night in the cell. The eyes of the unjust will stay awake. He started shaking. His wife began to cry. He said he didn't believe it was real. But his voice cracked when he spoke. He said he just wanted to sleep, even if it was for 1 night. I told him that sleep cannot come where truth is missing. That night, I couldn't eat. I lay on my mat and stared at the ceiling, thinking of how life turns. The same man who took my peace now wanted me to help him find his. I didn't know if I should pity him or be happy. But deep inside, I felt something was not finished yet. Something bigger was still coming. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. I didn't plan to go back to his house, but my heart kept pulling me there. Something in me wanted to see how far his body could go without rest. When I reached his compound, the gate was wide open. Inside, I saw Adora sitting on the steps, crying softly. Her wrapper was loose, her eyes red and tired. She told me he hadn't spoken all night. He just sat in the parlor staring at the wall. I entered and met him like that, sitting with his head bent, both hands shaking. The room was dark, even though the sun was already high. The curtains were closed. Empty bottles of water were on the floor. His lips were dry and his voice weak when he finally spoke. He said he wanted to go back to the village, that maybe if he faced what he did, he would find peace. I told him it was a good idea. Adaora didn't agree. She said people would laugh at them, but he didn't care. He said he had already become a story that people whisper about. That afternoon, he asked me to follow him. We entered his car. He was driving himself even though his hands were shaking. On the road, he started talking, his voice breaking like a man confessing to a priest. He said the day he took that money, something in him died. He said he told himself it was just 1 time, but he kept doing it. He said he built everything on lies. He said when his company grew, he forgot the people he cheated. I didn't answer him. I just listened. When we reached the village, the place was quiet. The road was rough and dusty. He parked near the old community hall where he used to work. Some elders were sitting under a tree playing draught. When they saw him, they stopped. Their eyes followed him like they were watching a ghost. One old man stood and asked what he came for. Chuka knelt down right there on the red sand. He said he came to ask for forgiveness. He said he took the development money that was meant for the widows and used it to start his business. The men looked at each other. Some shook their heads. One of them spat on the ground. The oldest man among them said the people he cheated were not all alive to forgive him. He said forgiveness was not a word you just speak and walk away. Chuka started crying, real tears running from eyes that had refused to close for years. He said he was ready to do anything. He promised to build a small clinic for the widows and children. He said he would sell his house if he had to. As he talked, a woman came from one of the nearby houses. Her face was hard. She said her mother died waiting for that money. She said her mother used to pray every day that God should fight whoever stole from the poor. When Chuka heard that, he covered his face and started shaking. His cry filled the whole compound. I stood and watched him, not knowing if I should pity him or not. That night we slept in the village, but he still didn't close his eyes. He kept walking around, talking to himself, saying names of people I didn't know. I sat outside and watched him. I could see he was not just tired in body, but also in soul. I knew something inside him was breaking slowly, and before it finished breaking, something strange would happen. The next morning, the village woke up to a strange quiet. Chuka hadn't slept all night, and neither had I. I watched him sit by the well, staring at the water like it could answer all his questions. He muttered names under his breath. names of people he had wronged, names I had never heard. His face was pale, and his hands trembled when he reached for the bucket. I wanted to speak, to tell him to stop, but something told me he needed to face it alone. We walked slowly through the village. Some people whispered when they saw him. Children ran behind him, pointing, asking why the man with eyes that never closed looked like he was carrying the whole world. He nodded at no one and didn't answer anyone. He only stopped at the small compound of the widow whose house he had taken money from. The door opened slowly, and a thin woman with tired eyes came out. She saw him, froze, and then her lips moved, but no sound came out. Chuka fell to his knees in front of her. He said he came to return what was never his. He said he wanted to build her a new house and pay her late husband's debts. The woman's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. She just watched him. I could see her pain from years of waiting, the bitterness that had hardened her heart. Chuka's tears fell like rain, but his body didn't shake anymore. It was as if something inside him had started to loosen. After that, he wanted to go further. He went to the market where he had cheated traders, to the school where he had taken bribes, to the church where he had lied. Everywhere he went, people stared. Some cursed him, some wept silently. Every face reminded him of what he had done. Every look burned in his eyes, and yet he walked. He wanted to face everything. He wanted to see if truth could finally bring him rest. By evening, he sat under a large mango tree at the edge of the village, exhausted but still awake. I sat beside him. He said he was scared that even after all this, sleep might not come. I told him that sleep comes when the soul is ready to release its burden, when you meet truth with courage. He looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw a flicker of hope in his wide red eyes. Night came, and the village was silent. Chuka remained awake, whispering names and numbers, promises and confessions. I watched him, feeling both fear and pity. He was a man unraveling, a man who had built everything on lies and was now trying to stitch it all back together with truth. I wondered if the world could forgive him, if sleep could finally find him. And somewhere deep inside, I knew that before the night ended, the reckoning he had avoided for years was going to catch up with him in a way he could never imagine. The sun had barely risen when I saw him sitting by the old graveyard. His face was pale, more than I had ever seen it, and his hands shook as he held the small wristwatch in his palm. He didn't speak, didn't move, only stared at the ground as if waiting for something that had been promised to him long ago. I followed slowly, my heart heavy, because I knew this was the moment everything would end. He knelt beside the grave of Mama Ngo, the old woman from prison who had first spoken the curse over him. I could feel the air thick around us, heavy with years of secrets, lies, and broken promises. Chuka began speaking quietly, naming every wrong he had done, every life he had touched and ruined. He spoke of me, of the widows, the children, the men he had cheated. His voice cracked with every name, but he did not stop. He confessed everything he had hidden, everything he had run from. By mid-morning, sweat was pouring down his face, but still his eyes refused to close. He kept talking, almost like he was trying to trade his voice for rest. I could see his soul unraveling, the layers of greed, pride, and fear peeling away under the weight of truth. When he finally fell silent, the world seemed still. I watched him closely, my own chest tight. This man who had haunted my life and stolen so much from others was now facing the emptiness he had built for himself. He placed the wristwatch on the grave and whispered promises that I knew he meant. He said he would dedicate his fortune to those he had wronged. He said he would build homes for widows, schools for children, and repay anyone who was left suffering because of him. I listened, and for the first time I felt something shift in the air, like the years of restless nights were finally making sense. Then it happened. His body slumped forward, still kneeling, and his eyes finally closed. Not in terror, not in struggle, but like a man who had carried a heavy load for far too long and could finally let go. I ran to him, but I already knew. His chest no longer moved. He had found sleep, the deep sleep he had been denied for 2 years, but it had come at the cost of his life. I sat beside him for hours, silent, holding his cold hands. I felt both sorrow and relief. The curse had ended, justice had been served, and the man who never slept had finally rested. When I left the graveyard, I looked back once. The sun shone on the grave, the wristwatch glinting in the light. I whispered that peace had finally come, and for the first time, I felt free from the shadow he had cast on my life. The village would talk about him for years, but I knew the truth. Chuka had faced his sins, met every soul he had wronged, and in that final act, even if it cost him his life, he had returned a piece of what he had stolen. And now, finally, both of us could begin to live again.